back to another edition of the Top Prospects podcast. And Logan, against all odds, we're here. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I didn't think baseball was going to be played until at least May. I mean, I didn't, let me put it this way. I didn't think I'd still be at Penn State while professional baseball was still being played. But finally, we have an agreement on a new CBA. Spring training starts this week already, and the season is going to be starting very shortly here in early April. So I want to get your overall thoughts. First of all, how good is it for baseball to be back?
Well, I think it's huge. And the main thing, I'm just shocked because we had seen, well, lockout lasted 99 days. So we had seen for that time span, the owners and the MLBPA, like those two sides just got basically nowhere most of the times they met. And even when they met in person in Florida, it took a while for those two sides to finally agree on the actual terms of this new CBA, which is something we knew that would be coming for a while. And it really kind of came out of nowhere like last week when Jeff Passan pretty much tweeted out that baseball is back. And I'm just surprised, especially since we were at a point where Rob Manfred was starting to cancel games, he was starting to cancel series. But it looks like now we're going to get a full 162 games in on the season, which is going to be amazing for baseball that they're able to get a season in when it looked like against all odds they weren't able to do just that. And there are a lot of interesting new things with this CBA that kind of intrigue me. I mean, first of all, universal DH, something we've really been wanting for a while now. We kind of got a taste of it in 2020 during the shortened season, but now we're actually having that full time for both leagues, which I think makes a lot of sense. Going to get to see a lot more, just a lot more of that. I think that's going to be a great one. A draft lottery as well is another one that kind of jumped out at me. I think kind of straying teams away from tanking and giving pretty much all the non-playoff teams a fair shot at getting that number one pick, and that includes top three teams having the same odds. So I feel like that'll make things a lot more interesting come draft time. And yeah, there's a lot of interesting pieces with the new CBA, and a lot of them going to be kind of negotiated as the months go along. There's deadlines set for those days, but the important thing right now, spring training games being played on Saturday, and we're still going to get to see baseball in April.
Yeah, and I mean 162 games. That's what I'm shocked that they were able to pull that off. Just because I took the bait. I mean, I fell for it every single time the MLB was canceled games. I thought, it's canceled. And then, of course, a couple hours later, be like, well, not so fast. The old Elite Corso, not so fast. And they say, oh, the games aren't actually canceled. If we could do a deal within the next 24 hours, that was the funniest part to me, was the whole like arbitrary, like every time there's an arbitrary deadline, they'd blow by it and there would be consequences, but then the consequences would just go away. It was, I mean, like, I get a lot of it was Manfred trying to kind of put his foot down, I guess. But at the end of the day, there was no real consequences to the delay in this, because still getting in a full season, still going to end around the same time too, in the beginning of November, really, with the last World Series games. So obviously the universal DH is huge. A lot of other stuff in the new CBA. First of all, obviously the extra playoff team, that's big. So I want to get your thoughts on, I've heard a lot of people say that now that only two teams will get that bye. So basically what you're going to have is six teams. I believe, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, six teams in each league make the playoffs. So one extra wild card team, but instead of the three division winners getting to move on to the division series, only two will now. So you're going to get really the two versus, I guess, the six, or no, the three versus the six, and the four versus the five seed. So does that take away, in your mind, from winning the division?
I don't really think it does. I mean, and at the end of the day, it's just one more playoff spot. I mean, it does. It would have definitely changed a lot this year just because the Braves would have now been in that wild card round instead of moving on to the divisional series because they were the worst division leader. And I mean, it definitely opens the door up for some teams. And I think it's a decent middle ground from what we had during the COVID year in 2020, where we had, I believe it was 8 teams per league in the playoffs, which I think was just way too much. And you had teams with losing records in there. And now I think with 6 teams in those spots, I think we'll still see some really good teams making those playoffs. I mean, this year it would have been the Blue Jays, which is a really good team. Um, in the AL, they would have that extra spot, and then even in the NL, it would have been a 83 win Reds team, which I mean I think was a quality team at the time before they made some trades that we'll talk about later. I think they would have been a quality team at that 6th spot. So I think we'll still see some good playoff teams. I still think we'll see competitive October baseball, which at the end of the day is really important, at least for me. So I think that that 12 is a really good number. I think that had it gone to 14, I think it would have definitely complicated some things. I think we definitely would have seen a lot more change than we would have had to. I mean, no one wants to see the top seed pick like who they want to play, you know. Like it's just weird, especially if they lose. Like it would have been too much change. I think 12 is a good spot for now.
Yeah, I think 12 is a good spot. I agree. I mean, and there's a lot of other big things, honestly, bigger than just one extra playoff team in this CBA. But for some of those fringe teams like my Philadelphia Phillies, it's a big deal. And I think, for a team like Seattle this year, I'll tell you the couple of teams that this affects most. Probably the Philadelphia Phillies, I would say, in the NL East, because I think the Mets and Braves are definitely going to make the playoffs. So I'd say the Phillies, probably the Cardinals, probably the Padres in the NL. And then if you look at the AL, it's probably, well, obviously the Rays, Yankees, and Jays. Whoever doesn't win that division, it's going to really impact. Um, the Central in general is really not that good. So I don't think there's going to be an extra team out of there. And then the AL West, and possibly the biggest winner out of all of this is the Mariners, because I really think this sets them up perfectly to finally make the playoffs this year and end their MLB long drought. So, and we'll touch on some of the moves that they made later, but there's a good 8 teams or so, give or take a couple, that really this helps. And I know that there's all this talk about small and big market teams, and quite honestly, it is annoying to me because look, all these owners have the money to spend like a big market team, but they don't. Like, I mean, let's be honest. There's a lot of big, like San Diego is a big city, and up until recently was not a big market, but now their owner spends big. That's kind of what I mean by I don't believe big and small markets are a real thing, but this does impact those teams that don't spend like your New York Mets that are going to spend, 180 million a year. So not up to that luxury tax. That's pretty important. Speaking of the luxury tax, that was a big sticking point, and we have some news on that. $230 million this year. So it is up. It's actually a $20 million increase from 21 to 22. And it'll peak. By the way, the CBA is good for 5 years. So through the 2026 season, it'll peak at $244 million. And of course, if you want to, I'm not sure how much you've really looked into this, but the Steve Cohen tax, if you want to talk about that, because your boy has his own tax now. He even said that it's better than getting his own bridge named after him. I mean, I guess, look, when you have that much money, I guess that's an honor. I don't really know.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Cohen has always prided himself on wanting to make the Mets competitive. And we talk about the Cohen tax, we joke about the Cohen tax all we want. And he's not afraid to go over it, which is something that I really respect as, a fan of the team he owns, the Mets, and is something that I feel like a lot of fans want in their owner, but they unfortunately just don't have. And it's nice to have, kind of that Cohen tax. I think it's very hilarious to have that kind of named after him, or just, kind of him calling himself that. But it's definitely encouraging. I think it was kind of my big fear coming out of the lockout for the Mets that they wouldn't spend as much just because like they were very close to that tax, and they had already made some moves already, but they kept on spending, and the Mets are trying to be competitive, and you got to respect that. And yeah, it was definitely a big part of the CBA, and we'll see how it kind of impacts other teams.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think Steve Cohen's going to be the only one to go over that. I mean, even the Yankees ownership and front office doesn't seem to really even want to go over the first level of the luxury tax as much. Speaking of which, obviously, I said 230 million is the first level, 250 is the second, 270 is the third, and now there's a fourth level, 290 million, which, by the way, I believe I'm looking at Fangraphs payroll here. The Mets are very close to going over. It'll be interesting to see if they go over that or not. Right now, their estimated payroll would be 285 million ish. So, and it sounds like there's supposed to be a pretty big penalty for going over that. But when you have Steve Cohen money, none of that really matters. But moving on to another one of the issues, the draft lottery. This really wasn't, in my mind, I don't think this is that big of a deal. I mean, this isn't the NBA in that in the NBA, you really need two big players to make the playoffs. I mean, that's my mind looking on it from the outside in, is that the NBA, it's a lot easier to tank and get good. Baseball, I mean, look at all the teams that have tanked for a long time and aren't good. The Mariners tanked for a long time, haven't been good till recently. The Phillies, a very good example of that. The Marlins have been a good example of that. I mean, the Pirates, another example. Obviously, they made it to the playoffs pretty recently, but they have tanked for extended periods of time. Same with the Orioles, and haven't been good for that long. So, in your mind, does the draft lottery? Do you think it really does anything?
I think it makes the draft a little more interesting, but other than that, I think that's really the extent of it. You mentioned there's no in the NBA, you don't need that much to be competitive. And in the NBA, there's always been like that one prize for getting the top pick. Like there's always been like that one blue chip prospect that everyone has their eye on, which in most years in the MLB, you don't really see that. I mean, you don't really see a Bryce Harper every single year in the MLB, which I mean, in those years, that's going to be huge, the draft lottery. But in recent years, especially, we haven't really seen like a big number one prospect that everyone's kind of after. So I think it's going to make things interesting for sure, but it's not going to have a huge impact in the long run.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I don't think the draft lottery. I mean, the MLB draft is already really hard to hit on. I mean, maybe even the top of the draft is pretty hard to hit on. Not like really 5 through the rest of the draft, but the top 5 can still offer a lot of variance in it too. A couple other notes from the new CBA that are pretty big in my mind. Actually, I didn't know this till just now, but clubs promoting top prospects to opening day rosters will be eligible to receive draft picks if the player finishes in the top 3 in the rookie of the year voting or top 5 in MVP and Cy Young voting. I love that. That is exactly what the MLB needed to do to stop. I mean, when you look at it, the Jared Kelenic rule, I mean, that's what I would call it, just because of the amount of attention he got for being held down when at the time it didn't really look like he needed to be. So I think that this was the best way they could have gone about it in terms of getting, these players that should be up in the majors to start the season up earlier than whatever it was. I think it was in May or something, to get that extra year of control.
I feel like at the end of the day, it's kind of hard to get teams to want to send up those top guys because they would get more control if they held them back. So I think that's definitely a good start in trying to change that. I mean, you have teams in the past that have called up their prospects early, trying to be competitive, with the most recent example being Pete Alonso getting called up at the start of the year in, I believe, 2019, and it ended up working really well. But you have those Jared Kelenic examples. So I feel like that's a good way to kind of incentivize teams from preventing that from happening and keep letting those top prospects play. And which that's something that at the end of the day, everyone wants to see. Everyone wants to see those prospects play and not be kind of held back in the minor leagues for longer than they should be. So there's never going to be a perfect solution to fixing something like that, but that's a good start by the MLB.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is a good start for sure. Looking at some of the other things that have been included, I mean, we could really do a whole show on this, but just a lot going on. So the minimum salary, largest single year increase up to 700,000 this year, going up 20,000 a year until 2026, where the CBA finishes, and it'll be at 780,000 a year. So, I mean, overall, in my mind, I think it seems like a good CBA. I mean, obviously, I'm not a player or an owner, but I mean, it even included the pre-arbitration bonus pool of $50 million to the top 100 players. So basically, under this system, that helps some of these guys. Like there's an example here: NL Cy Young Award winner Corbin Burns would have seen his salary jump from 608,000 to 4.2 million last year. Randy Arozarena, Jonathan India, same kind of deal. They would have seen their salary triple last year. So that kind of stuff really helps when you got like a Juan Soto, for example, who far and away, look, carries that Nationals team, but is also like at the bottom of the payroll because he's, pre-arbitration, although he might be in arbitration now, not 100% sure. But that does help those guys that are absolute stars. I mean, you look at Pete Alonso, same kind of deal. He is vastly underpaid in the pre-arbitration system that he's, if he's just making like 700,000, the league minimum. But now that he can make more money from this bonus pool, that definitely does help. So it seems like that there finally was some compromise here. I mean, overall, I mean, especially since it's only for 5 years, it seems like a good deal to me. I'm not sure how you really think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good deal, but at the end of the day, we get to see baseball. I mean, that's what fans have wanted. I feel like at the end of the day, we've seen the MLB, we've seen the owners, we've seen the players kind of fighting for about 3 months or so, and at the end of the day, it just hurts the fans. So the fact that they get to see baseball back being played once again, that's a big win for them. It took a long time to get it to happen. It took a lot of spring training games getting cut for that to happen, but it ended up happening. And that's a big win for baseball to actually get to play.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, there is so much of this talk, and I'd love to know all the people out there that were saying, oh, I'm never going to watch baseball again. Yeah, I get it. It was annoying. Like, I mean, it truly was annoying. But I mean, come on. I would be willing to bet of the people that said, I'm never going to watch baseball again. The sport is horrible. It's broken. As bad as it might have seemed, I would bet 80 to 90% of those people are probably going to watch games. I mean, I don't know. That's in my mind. The sport is a relic. It's nobody's going to watch it anymore. Those takes got annoying. So look, I'm happy we can finally watch some baseball. I mean, either way, look, I'm a big minor league baseball fan. I would have absolutely been watching minor league baseball a ton if there was no MLB. But obviously, it's great to have the MLB back. As frustrating as it might be for my team, maybe not yours, but it's definitely a tough one to have my Phillies back already frustrating me. But anyway, one more thing I do want to touch on. I guess this was kind of in the CBA. The new schedule breakdown starting next year. I hate it. I'm going to be completely honest. I see. Wow, interesting. I see that you disagree with me on this. Here's the thing. I don't like the whole. Basically, how this was described is it's an NBA schedule. Obviously, you play, I guess, a home and road series against every team, from what it seems. Or no, maybe, yeah, you do. You play a home and road with actually just with your rival, and then the other 14 teams in, like, let's say the AL, you play for one series. So you play a total of 46 interleague games and 56 divisional games. I don't I don't know. I don't like that. To me, interleague play, I've never been a fan of it. I've never been completely abolish interleague play. I like how the system is now. I thought the schedule is perfectly fine. Sure, it sucks if you're the Orioles and you're in the AL East, or it sucks if you're the Marlins and you're in the NL East, and you have, all those teams that are big spenders. I get that. And I think that that's what this is kind of going after, is it's not an unbalanced schedule anymore, but it takes away from the rivalry. Like, to me, the Phillies Mets rivalry, I thought last year was awesome. The whole, I know, throwing at people. Look, I know that's not great for the game, but the drama itself, like, I know, like, there was the whole Reese Hoskins thing in, was it 2020 or 2019, where he got thrown at and then bat flipped, whatever. But I love that. That really only, to me, happens in divisional games. I mean, you can't tell me that people are going to get up for the New York Mets versus the Detroit Tigers. I just don't see it. I mean, I'd be curious to hear your take on this, though.
I mean, seeing a Javier Baez return wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but I'm shocked. I mean, you're still getting 56 games within the division. I mean, it's not like you're getting no games in the division. And I think what we've seen in baseball, I think we'd love to see like teams kind of get to play all these other teams. I don't think we get to see that in the current game right now. I think that it's going to be great to be able to see like every team get to play a Mike Trout every single year. I think it's going to be great for like attendance purposes. Like, you'll get to see like all these stars around the game, where I mean, in the past, you don't get to play every team. It's not a guarantee. So I think that in that respect, it's going to be good. And I get it. There's going to be less divisional games, less of those moments. But 56 games is still going to be a lot of games. And it's still going to create some of those opportunities. It's still, I think, 7 games per team, which it makes those 7 games really important, by the way, against those teams, just because, divisional race and so. But I think it's gonna be great for baseball to have those stars that normally wouldn't play against each other to be able to play against each other. I think that's the biggest takeaway from you with that.
Yeah, I do. Okay, I will agree with you on the seeing Mike Trout thing, because I get that from a personal perspective there. Yes, it is annoying, when I believe the current way it is right now is you play the one division and it alternates. So, like, one year you play the AL West, AL Central, AL East. So basically you get a home game against the Angels because you only play one series every, I guess that's 6 years. So yes, I see how that's flawed. I I mean, I guess it is only going from 19 divisional games to 14, which isn't terrible. The thing that makes it, I guess, okay with me is that if you're going to add the extra wild card, at least now it makes those teams fighting for the wild card spots have comparable schedules. So I get it from that perspective. I hope this doesn't mean the end of those divisional rivalries. Now, there's some rivalries. Look, I think Red Sox Yankees, this might be a hot take. We've done best rivalries before. I think Red Sox Yankees in the last couple of years has been the most overblown rivalry of all time. I could do without, the powers that be on national television shoving that down our throat every single week, every other week, whatever, during the summer. So yes, I'm actually glad that that's reduced from 19 to 14. But, at the same time, I hope it doesn't lose the intensity that these series once had. And I'm worried that it will, but we'll see. Now, so we've touched on that. Basically, yeah, divisional games, 56 games. You'll play other 10 league opponents. So from the other two divisions, 60 games, 6 times a piece, 3 home, 3 road, and then the 46 interleague games. Not a terrible breakdown, I guess, but it's definitely going to be different. It is going to be more of an, NHL or an NBA kind of deal with the schedule. Now, moving on to free agency here. So a lot going on. I'm not even sure where you want to start with this. I guess Boy, I don't know where to start with this. I guess we'll start with, what do you think is the biggest move so far? Because actually, a lot of the bigger moves have been via the trade.
Yeah, I think we've seen most of these moves being trades. I mean, I don't think there have been too many big free agency moves yet. I think we've seen a lot of rumors of guys like Freddie Freeman, Carlos Correa, Chris Bryant, guys that haven't really signed yet. But I think the biggest move so far has been this Matt Olson trade, where he was sent from the A's to the Atlanta Braves. And it pretty much closes any door that Freddie Freeman would go back to Atlanta. But the fact that the Braves had to give up their basically top prospects with Christian Pache, Shea Langeliers, I think those are their 1 and 2, or they were their 1 and 2 prospects. To get a guy like Matt Olson, who's coming off probably one of his best years in Oakland, and that team they're currently rebuilding right now. Traded Chris Bassitt as well to New York, so trading Matt Olson to his hometown team, and then the Braves immediately extending him to an 8-year contract. So I think that's going to be a big thing for Atlanta. They're getting younger at that first base position, which is huge, but they gave up some of their top prospects to do so, and they could have easily given that money to Freddie Freeman. I think it's going to be weird. I mean, not seeing Freddie Freeman, especially for fans of NL East teams like you and I. And Matt Olson, he isn't as good average wise, but OPS wise, actually finished better than Freddie Freeman this year, I believe. So comparatively with the bats, I think that the Braves getting a really good guy here in Matt Olson, and a guy that could hit right behind Ronald Acuna Jr. and that can could create a deadly duo in that Braves lineup. So I think that should be a really fun thing to watch. And the A's just starting out their rebuild here, as I mentioned before. As the rest of the division gets better, the Astros and Mariners are getting there. The Angels are making moves. So A's kind of starting from scratch.
Yeah, the A's fire sale is on, and I mean it really is a shame for them. And I hope that, oops, my computer case is like falling apart over here. I hope that for them, that maybe once they get into this new stadium, that it'll open up more of a revenue stream. It's frustrating. I mean, it's got to be frustrating seeing your owner not open the pocketbook on good players like this. And I think the good news here is that obviously Olson went to a place that it seemed like he wanted to go. Being from the Atlanta area, it seemed like a natural fit for him. So I guess he's probably not all too upset. But overall, I thought the return was pretty fair. So I believe at the time, Olson had 2 years left on his contract. Shea Langeliers, really, he's been more of a defensive first catcher, really popped with the bat last year. I could see him making a run at the starting role later this season. I mean, he's a good catcher. I think the top 2 catching prospects are very clearly Francisco Alvarez, your guy there, and of course for the Orioles, Adley Rutschman. But outside of that, I thought Shea Langeliers was probably like the 4th or 5th best catching prospect out there. And then a good outfielder, Christian Pache. He was another one who was a top 100 prospect at one time. The concern is the bat. The glove is very good. And then 2 good pitchers in Joey Estes and Ryan Cusick. But I would say a good haul for 2 years of Olson. But then the Braves, again, I don't understand how they do this. They get this like voodoo magic where they somehow convince players to sign for like absolutely no money. Like, let's take a walk down memory lane here. Ozzy Albies signs a 7-year, $35 million contract. Like, what? Why? There's like, look, if you're a Braves fan, absolutely, that's great. But if you're another player, okay, if you're a second baseman, see the number Albies is putting up, you would want him to get paid more because he sets the bar for other second basemen. Like, I just don't understand that. I mean, look, maybe it's because I'm not a player, and maybe he just, after one good season, wants to get the money because you never know what's going to happen with injuries and whatnot. But That seems like highway robbery to me. And then of course you have one of the biggest offenders of it is Ronald Acuna Jr. I got to find his contract here for some. Oh, here it is. 8 years, 100 million for a guy that's a perennial MVP candidate. Don't get that one either. I think that's insane. And there's two club option years on the end of that, which will of course be picked up, I would imagine. And then Matt Olson signs a 8-year, $168 million deal, which is fantastic for a guy that's 28 years old. He's entering his prime. Seems like another steal. So I I don't know. I feel like there needs to be an investigation. It's brutal. I mean, I don't get how they get away with this highway robbery, but good on the Braves for them, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I think Matt Olson definitely could have gone for like a 5, 6 year contract extension worth a lot more money, but he's basically under contract for the next 10 years now because I think he had 2 years left in his current deal. So he's going to be under contract until he's 38 years old, which I mean, it could help him because he's a power first baseman, which typically those guys don't age particularly well. So we'll see where he is on the back half of that contract, and it may end up being beneficial to both parties, honestly. But yeah, I think at the start at least, the Braves are absolutely getting the better end of this deal because Matt Olson, he's especially after last year, the years coming off, they're getting their money's worth and then a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely they are. Another one, great signing today, Colin McHugh for them. He was excellent in a Rays uniform last year, 2 years, 10 million. And in my mind, I mean, in terms of just looking at his stats last year, he had the best numbers. I mean, he had what is this? I gotta find his stats now, but I believe he had like a 1-something ERA over like 40 games. It was ridiculous. And his strikeout numbers, 10.41 K per nine. So he was excellent. I don't know how they stole him for that price, but here we are. Alex Anthopoulos has done a great job there. Now, I have to ask the whole Freddie Freeman thing. One, if you're a Braves fan, how do you feel about this? And two, where do you think Freddie goes?
Well, I mean, if you're a Braves fan, I think you're definitely disappointed because he seemed like a guy who, no doubt in my mind, should have been a Brave for life. I think just the way he's been like so consistent with that Braves team. He was there when they were bad. He was there. His last play, most likely, was the final out in the World Series where they finally won it all. So he's been there through thick and thin. He seemed like a guy who should have been a Brave. And I mean, baseball's a business. I mean, you have to be happy if you're Atlanta to kind of get this really good replacement in Matt Olson, a guy who's younger, a guy who can probably do the same stuff that Freddie Freeman does, just not really as much with average. But in terms of what he's done in his Braves career, winning an MVP in a shortened season, winning a World Series last year, Freddie Freeman's done just about everything he possibly could in Atlanta. And now he has the opportunity to chase the big money, which it feels like he will. And it feels like despite the DH now coming to the NL, it won't be with the Braves. So I think now the most clear option for him is the Dodgers. I think that there's a clear opening at first base. I mean, I know you have Max Muncy there, who is an all-star, but he can play second base, and the Dodgers can easily kind of maneuver that. You have guys like Gavin Lux, Trey Turner, who can kind of also play the infield as well. I believe Justin Turner is there as well. I believe one of those guys would end up playing DH at some point, but there is a hole for the Dodgers at first base. I mean, the Yankees, you can argue, also have a hole there, but they made a trade for a guy with another big contract that I don't think that I think would prevent them from making that kind of move. So I think that at the top, the Dodgers are definitely there, and maybe you can see a team like the Blue Jays as a dark horse. Maybe I think they would be my biggest dark horse, but I think the Dodgers would probably be my top team for him.
It's interesting you say that because those two teams, first of all, I would agree with. Second of all, they both lost a big bat in this offseason. So that would be a big replacement. I mean, if you look at Corey Seager, Obviously different position, but they got to fill his role as a high average 30 plus homer kind of guy. Who fits that? Freddie Freeman. Same thing if you look at Marcus Semien over in Toronto. Again, I mean, he had, well, I know he set the record for second baseman home runs, 40 something homers last year. It was ridiculous. Again, they need that big bat to plug in the lineup to fill that spot. So I think it's between LA and Toronto. New York, probably a distant third in my mind, the way things are looking right now. But just as far as Freddie Freeman goes, I mean, yeah, I'm shocked. I mean, I mean, this would be like if the Mets were to win the World Series this year, I would put a comparison to, it might be a little bit of an exaggeration. I would say this would be like not re-signing DeGrom if the Mets were to win the World Series. I mean, obviously it's a bit of a difference just because, the whole pitching versus position player thing, once every 5 days versus every day, but he just meant that much to the franchise that I'm just kind of surprised. But in the long run, just because of the way, Freddie Freeman's a bit older than Olson, it might actually be a smart move, looking at the contract and that kind of stuff for the Braves. So a good move by them for sure. I think, is it the right one for the fan base? I don't know. It's a tough call, but I do want to move on to there's a couple other trades we can go to here. So I'll let you decide. You want to go with either the Yankees trade here or the Reds trade?
I already mentioned the Yankees trade, so I mean we can kind of move to that one. And what was really a head scratcher in my mind. I mean, you have Josh Donaldson, who, yeah, he's a former MVP, but got 2 years left in a pretty hefty contract alongside Isaiah Kiner-Falefa going to the Twins for Gary Sanchez and Gio Urshela. And I believe a catching prospect is going to the Yankees as well. But it's just a weird mix of just a weird mix of players kind of getting dealt here. And especially from the Yankee side of things, you get rid of Gary Sanchez, who's been your starting catcher for quite some time. He's definitely underperformed on the defensive side of things. He's kind of gotten worse on offense, but you don't really have your replacement catcher. You have, I mean, Kyle Higashioka, most likely going to be your catcher, which even still wasn't that great. He didn't have a great year, but you're trying to fix the infield. They were rumored to get Carlos Correa. I think they were like the top team to get Carlos Correa at some point, but Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, being a major league shortstop himself, I feel like it's going to silence those rumors a little bit. And then Josh Donaldson kind of replacing Gio Urshela as well. It's going to be a very interesting move for the Yankees because Donaldson has kind of been up and down ever since leaving Toronto. He's had a couple nice years, had one really good one in Atlanta, and he's been kind of hurt ever since. So we'll see what his health is like now with the Yankees. And I think he definitely has potential to be a solid bat for that team. The Yankees do kind of have that history of turning around some veterans' careers, kind of late in their careers. So it should be interesting. I think the Twins, this is a great move for them. They're kind of reloading a little bit here. They did trade away Mitch Garver in that same deal that brought Kiner-Falefa to the Twins. And I think Gary Sanchez is kind of a slightly better version of Mitch Garver, just guys that don't really have the ability to hit for high average, but they can hit like 20, 30 home runs in a season. And then Gio Urshela, I think, is a quality third baseman, a quality infielder to have. And he's on the younger side as well compared to Donaldson. So I think it's going to be interesting for both sides. I don't really think there's a clear winner just yet.
I'm going to actually disagree. Well, yeah, I'm going to disagree with you. I think that there is a pretty clear winner here, and I think it's the Twins. I mean, I don't really understand what is kind of going on with the Yankees. I mean, I look at their position player group right now. I don't know. I don't think Kiner-Falefa is that great. I mean, if you're going to tell me that he is going to be what prevents you from signing a Trevor Story or Correa or even, whoever. I, I don't get it. I don't get why you would do that. In my mind, I think he's just a stopgap for their two big prospects, Peraza and Anthony Volpe, that are coming up as middle infielders. But I just don't see anybody I can really trust in this lineup. I mean, first of all, their catching situation is not good. It's either Kyle Higashioka or Ben Rortvedt. I don't think either of them are really starting caliber catchers. They don't really have in my mind, a great left side of the infield. I mean, Josh Donaldson is old, and think about this from a Yankees perspective. What has been the biggest question mark on that team? It's been the injuries. The last couple of years have been huge. So what do? They go out and trade for perhaps the most injury-prone corner infielder out there right now, and Josh Donaldson. I mean, it's high boom bust potential in that. Yeah, I mean, Josh Donaldson, if he gets back to like he did in Atlanta, is a huge addition. But I just, at 36 years old, I don't know if I can count on that. So to me, I don't think they really win this trade because of that. And then I look at what they gave up. Gary Sanchez, I know that he had a difficult, let's say, that relationship in New York, just because of the ups and downs there. But even Gary Sanchez of last year, he hit 204, not great, with 23 homers. I'm not sure that what they have right now is going to help. I mean, I don't think, maybe the average will go up a bit, but I don't think the power is going to be there for either Higashioka or Rortvedt. So I don't get that. And then Gio Urshela, I've always, since he had that breakout a couple of years ago, have been kind of high on. I mean, he's a great glove. I know he had a bit of a down year with the glove last year, but I don't know. It just seems like they sold low on Urshela, and I just don't really love what they got in return. But in all honesty, for both sides, it's a weird trade.
Yeah, I think especially for the Yankees, it's boomer bust, especially on the Donaldson side of things. And yeah, I mean, Gary Sanchez, he's kind of been on the decline for quite some time. But I think the biggest thing with Donaldson is that it's a higher risk in that you really can't put him at DH because that spot basically reserved for Giancarlo Stanton. I mean, that's basically, I feel like we're going to see Stanton at DH, and I feel like we're going to see Donaldson at third base. So if the injury issues kind of keep up, it could be tough for the Yankees. But if the bat is there like it has been in the past, then it could work out. But I think that it's still up in the air right now, really for those reasons. I mean, we don't know just how healthy these guys are going to be, and a lot of the guys in these trades have had injury issues in the past.
I will say one thing in that it seems like they're rumored to be after Anthony Rizzo again. That seems like a good fit. The only thing is it kind of depends when they sign this contract, because Freddie Freeman's going to be off the board, and Rizzo is probably the next best thing on the board for first baseman. I don't know. What do you think? If you had the odds here, let's say it's, I don't know, going back to New York minus 150, are you taking that, or do you think he goes elsewhere?
I think it makes a lot of sense for the Yankees to re-sign Rizzo. I think that he's going to come a lot cheaper than Freddie Freeman would. And you really still can't trust a guy like Luke Voit, in my mind, to be the first baseman. I feel like he's probably on the move in my mind before the season starts. So Anthony Rizzo, he wasn't terrible during his time in New York. He got off to a hot start, kind of fizzled out towards the end there. But I think he would be a perfect bat to kind of counterpart the guys of like Judge, Donaldson, and Stanton. I feel like he'd be kind of a decent fit going back to New York there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think he does go back to New York, actually. I mean, in my mind, they kind of have to add another big
All right.
bat to that.
So
lineup.
you're gonna laugh at this. I think that Anthony Rizzo just re-signed with the Yankees.
Oh, well, there you
go.
go.
Just now.
I have always wanted to break something. I mean, I guess you technically broke it. I've always wanted to have something break while we're on the pod. So is it, do you know who reported that?
Jesse Rogers of ESPN reported it, and it's going to be pending on a physical. So no terms or years yet, but I guess Anthony Rizzo is back in New York, and he's going to be that perfect counterpart to guys like Judge, Stanton, and Donaldson.
Well, how about that? That's great. I was a little worried we wouldn't have anything interesting happening since it's 11 o'clock on the East Coast here, but that's good to see that we had some breaking news during this. Great job on your bet there. I mean, I had it at like minus 150 goes back to the Yankees and you took it. So congrats on that. Well, there you go, Yankees fans. Pretty exciting. And now John Heyman tweeted that out as well. So, okay, there's another first baseman off the board. That's going to heat up the market for Freeman even more, just because now he's really the only guy left. So you're really going to have Freeman's market, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on the teams here. It sounds like the Red Sox are now in, the Blue Jays, the Rays somehow, the Dodgers, and I believe that's it. Am I missing anybody?
I think you got it all. I don't know how the Rays would be in this. I mean, I guess with his age, you could probably like not pay like top dollar, but I feel like that'd be really weird seeing Freeman in Tampa Bay. But I think you got the teams right.
Yeah, I think it is those four. So the AL East, big stakes there really, because now with the Yankees getting their first baseman for the Jays, Rays, and Red Sox, that's a big deal there. But I do want to move on. Maybe we'll get some term on that deal later, maybe not, I don't know. But let's go to, there's actually a lot of other deals we could go to. The Twins have been very busy. I do want to get to your Mets though. The Chris Bassitt trade. I'm actually pretty familiar with, especially Adam Oller, seeing him pitch this summer. But what are your thoughts on the trade?
I think it makes a lot of sense for the Mets. I mean, they were definitely looking at a guy to be in that rotation. I think they were looking at guys like Carlos Rondon, who signed with the Giants like the day after baseball came back. They were looking at a guy like Kikuchi, who signed with the Blue Jays. And I think they were definitely in need of a guy who could be the number three, because the Mets, they're always good at building these rotations of five different guys, and then there's no depth there. So I think this is definitely a good way for the Mets to get some depth. And Chris Bassitt, he's really capable of being the number three guy in this really stacked rotation. He was already capable of being a number one on his own Oakland A's staff. But now you give the Mets a staff of Jacob deGrom, who's already going to be the opening day starter. That's been confirmed already. Max Scherzer, Bassitt, Taijuan Walker, who definitely had a rough second half, but he had a really good first half. So we could see he could be a mixed bag. You don't know. And then Carlos Carrasco, who's hurt for most of the time he was back or was coming off an injury. And then if those guys don't work, you have guys like David Peterson, you have Tyler McGill, you have options out there. So I think that this is definitely huge for the Mets. And I think my one concern with this is that Bassitt's going to be a free agent next year. He's already in his 30s. And JT Ginn, who was in the deal for New York, he was your second best pitching prospect. He was in your top 10 in your farm system. But you still have a guy like Matt Allen in your farm system, which definitely could help that you kept him. But it's definitely concerning because the Mets did give up a top 5 prospect in their system for Javier Baez for half a season. So, and then they lost him. So we'll see now if Chris Bassitt can have a good season and then maybe get re-signed for a few more so the Mets wouldn't lose one of their top prospects for essentially nothing.
Yeah, I mean Bassitt, that the top four in the rotation of DeGrom, Scherzer, Bassitt, and then this has Carrasco, but I'm assuming probably Taijuan Walker, whenever he comes back, would be fitting in there somewhere. But yeah, those guys all 33 years of age or older. So definitely a veteran rotation there. But the addition of Bass is great. I mean, you're going to have to run the gauntlet every time you play that Mets team with that rotation. I mean, if you avoid DeGrom and Scherzer, you're still going to get Chris Bassitt, who again was very good last year and has been a very solid pitcher really the last 4 seasons. really nothing eye-popping in terms of like strikeouts, but his walks, his command's pretty good. Again, he's posted good numbers for a while now. And then, Carlos Carrasco obviously had a bit of a down year last year, but he's been good. Taijuan Walker, depending on if you get first or second half, Taijuan Walker, we'll have to see. But, that's a very good rotation. I would put that rotation up against anybody. JT Ginn, I, I'm honestly kind of torn on giving him up. I had heard different things about him, and that his velocity may not have been back to what it was before his injury. So not sure. That in hindsight will be interesting to see this season. Adam Oller, I did see a lot last year in Binghamton. Really liked him. He was a breakout star in Binghamton. His really his big thing was control. Once he got a bit more control, his strikeout numbers really got cranking up in Binghamton. Went up to AAA Syracuse, posted a 2.54 ERA in 8 starts. To me, he's a sleeper and one that a team like Oakland, who got a lot out of Cole Irvin from Philadelphia, who is, in my mind, has a lot less stuff than Adam Oller. They got a lot out of Cole Irvin. I think Adam Oller is going to be starting this year at the major league level for the A's, possibly even in a mid-rotation spot. I'm pretty high on him as one of those guys that's going to break out in his sort of like mid-20s, late 20s. He's not a younger guy. He's already 27. So, but I think he's going to break out in Oakland. But overall, I actually think that was a fair deal there for both sides.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it all depends on how Chris Bassitt really does, but for the Mets to kind of hold on to their top prospects on the position player side of things, I think was definitely a big thing. And yeah, I think that it's really all going to depend on what happens now with Chris Bassitt. I think that's the big thing with that, and if he's vaccinated or not with the new policy for New York. You got to be vaccinated for if you're a Mets or Yankee player.
Yeah, that'll be that'll be interesting. I know there's some speculation about Aaron Judge and all that. That'll be something to watch really throughout the season if that's not repealed at any point. Yeah, I mean that's going to be interesting. I mean, obviously we don't really know who all's vaccinated, who's not, what the story is behind that. But if that's still going to be in place in mid late season, that's definitely going to be an interesting issue for the Yankees and Mets roster to have to go around. Now I do want to get my computer is about to die. That's fun. But I do want to get to one of the other big trades. So we touched on Olson, we touched on Bassitt, and we got to the Donaldson, Gary Sanchez, whatever that was. But big news yesterday, Jesse Winker and Eugenio Suarez to Seattle for Justin Dunn, Jake Fraley, Brandon Williamson, and a player to be named later. Logan, I have my opinion on this set in stone, but I want you to go first here. How do you feel about this?
This is a really interesting move for Seattle here, and I think that just kind of the way they were, the way they competed last year, I think this is actually a perfect time for them to take that next step and try and be competitive, especially with that extra playoff spot that we talked about before. I mean, Jesse Winker's been just improving steadily year after year, and as a Mets fan, his feuds with that team has been very hard to deal with. But getting a guy like Jesse Winker in your lineup is going to be really huge, especially with top prospects kind of coming up, like Kelnick and Julio Rodriguez. Whenever they come up in the outfield, I feel like it should be a lot of fun. And Eugenio Suarez, I think, should make a decent DH. He's definitely had a few down years when it comes to the batting average side of things. So we'll see kind of how he fits. But obviously, the big piece here is Jesse Winker. And I don't think the Mariners even gave up that much. I saw Justin Dunn was in the deal, former New York Met, and they gave up Jake Fraley and some other guys as well. I think that it's honestly not a bad haul for the Mariners to give up for that kind of for that kind of package. And I think that they're going to be a fun team to watch in Seattle. I mean, they already made a few signings. I forgot which starting pitcher they signed. Was it Kevin Gausman they brought in, or was it someone else? No, he went to Toronto.
Yeah, it
Who
wasn't Gosman.
they signed one big money starter.
Yeah, let me look at who that was.
It was Robbie Ray, I think.
Yep, Robbie Ray.
Robbie Ray. Yeah, so they're making moves, and it's really fun to see in Seattle. So I think that they're definitely a contender for one of those wild card spots. And the Reds, just like the A's, they missed their window. They're trying to tank now, especially after selling off on Sonny Gray as well. I think you can definitely try and move guys like Luis Castillo in the near future, and really all they would have left after that is just Jonathan India, kind of an older Joey Votto, and Nick Castellanos already out the door as well. Can try and trade Mike Moustakas too. So the Reds, they had their window a couple years ago. You could have argued that they could have kept competing, especially since at the season, if they had that extra playoff spot already last season, they would have gotten it. And they already play in a very weak division in the NL Central, where the Pirates are rebuilding, the Cubs are rebuilding, the Brewers and Cardinals are not great. So you could have made the case for the Reds to keep on trying for a playoff spot, but they didn't see their window, and now they made a big move towards rebuilding.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this, I don't know. I mean, it seems like a money saving move. I don't really get why Cincinnati saw the need to do this. I mean, they got hot later last year, and I mean that's always been a lineup to me with Castellanos in it, with Jonathan India playing the way he did last year. And of course, Tyler Naquin had his ups and downs, but and Jesse Winker breaking out like that. That's always been a lineup to me that has seemed really good. And then on top of it, they had great starting pitching. They had Sonny Gray, who obviously in 2019 was fantastic. Hasn't been as good, but still very good. And then Luis Castillo, Tyler Mahle. They've had great pitching and a good lineup. Like they should be competing. I don't see why. I think with the expanded playoffs, they absolutely should have given it another go with this lineup. I don't understand it at all. If I were a Reds fan, I would be frustrated with the way ownership has done things. I guess it's going to be a prospect heavy team. I do have a couple of near ready guys. Jose Barrero is a shortstop. He should be up. He might play probably short, I would assume, in place of Kyle Farmer. And then Hunter Green, a flamethrower, who will probably be a starting pitcher there in Cincinnati. But yeah, I didn't think that they had to give up a whole lot. Justin Dunn, I mean, the book on him is that his ERA last year wasn't bad. I think it was a 3.7 something, but his walk to strikeout ratio or strike to walkout ratio is not good. He needs to get better control. Jake Fraley doesn't hit well enough at all in my mind. Brandon Williamson, decent prospect, but yeah, I mean, really to me, this was all about dumping Eugenio Suarez's contract. You really saw him kind of decline last year, his numbers. He still hit 31 homers, but hit below the Mendoza line, still striking out at a near 30% clip. So I guess they just saw that contract as too much to continue with. Even though really the AAV was only 9.4 million through 2024. So I don't know. I don't really get that, but Jesse Winker, I mean, you absolutely should get more for Jesse Winker. I mean, last year had a breakout year, hitting 305, 24 homers, 71 runs batted in. I don't know. That just seems like way too light of a package for those two guys, but great for Seattle. I mean, I really hope that this is their year to finally break through. I think it is, especially if Correa doesn't go back to Houston. They might compete for the division, definitely for a wild card spot, though.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that although the rumors have kind of shown Correa going back to Houston, I still think that the Mariners, especially with the way the A's are kind of falling off, can definitely take that jump into playoff contention there. They've made a lot of great moves during free agency, that this one being one of them. And yeah, I think the Reds, they definitely could have given it another go with that team, but I think the big thing is that they weren't really going to sign Nick Castellanos back, and he was a big part of their offense and kind of what they did in that starting lineup. But you have to feel for the Reds. I feel like they were kind of a year too early when they went all in. They had traded for Trevor Bauer. They had like their peak during the COVID year, and that one kind of messed them up. They made the playoffs during the shortened season, but didn't win a game. I don't think they scored a run in that series against the Braves way back when. And then Trevor Bauer left, and they were kind of left with a big hole in their pitching staff, which they could never really fill. And they got close, just not close enough. And then maybe they kind of tanked a year too early. In my mind, I think they could have definitely kept guys like Castillo. They could have kept well, they still have Castillo. They could have kept guys like Gray and Winker and Suarez, and they could have maybe tried to re-sign Castellanos, or at least maybe a cheaper option, maybe like a Michael Conforto would have been nice for them. And they could have made one last run to get that last playoff spot, but they just didn't see it happening, and kind of ended their chances at really competing, especially while the division was as weak as it was.
Yeah, that's really tough on Joey Votto, especially. I mean, he's been really loyal to that city. Getting up there, 38 years old. I think he'll turn 39 during the season. I was hoping that for his sake that they would kind of keep the gang together, so to speak, and go in for one last run just for him, for his sake, for all that he's done for that franchise. Free agency would have been the way to do that, without giving up the farm. But I guess this is the way that they chose. But yeah, I don't know. It seems like a head scratcher to me. I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't hold out for another season or two just to kind of see how things went. Well, that'll be it for this edition of the Top Prospects podcast, but we've got a lot more coming, a lot of big name free agents. Maybe a certain guy, Chris Bryant, to my fills, probably not, but we'll see. But we will be covering all of that very shortly. Great to have baseball back, and we'll keep you updated throughout the rest of the season. For the Top Prospects podcast, I'm Chris Lemmo. He's Logan Bourandas, and we'll see you next time.
Hey everybody, thank you for tuning into this edition of Penn State Sports Night. We hope you liked that segment.
And we're sure there's other Penn State Sports Night segments that you are going to love as well. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content.
And check us out on social media for updates and behind the scenes clips and pics. Follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action.
For all of us here at the Belisari Media Center, we are
Penn State Sports Night.